Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
Want awesome health? How about doubling your energy? With our free Awesome Health course, you can get a new video and lesson every single day for 84 straight days. The course covers everything from optimizing your digestion, nutrient intake, correct health issues, including weight, skin, energy, immune system, and so much more. The course could easily be worth $200 or $300 for, and yet it's 100% free when you go to bioptimizer.com. That's bioptimizers.com. Once you're there, just enter your name and email to get the first 3 phases of the Bioptimization report. You'll get the report immediately and begin getting your video lessons each and every day from there on in.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today, we're going to talk about longevity, or the science of senolytics. And today, joining us is Dr. Nick Bitz, and he is a naturopathic physician that specializes in Ayurvedic medicine. He is a leading voice in the natural products industry and currently serves as Senior Vice President of Product Development at Neurohacker Collective. His areas of expertise include nootropics, anti-aging medicine, biohacking, herbology, nutrition, and dietary supplements. We're going to talk about a few things today. I want to welcome you to the show. So welcome, Dr. Nick.
Thank you for having me. This should be fun.
So years ago, I read a book. I started studying meditation, and I got into the collective works of Paramahansa Yogananda, kind of the forerunner of bringing Eastern philosophy to the Western world, certainly from an Ayurvedic perspective. And he talked about, I think it was Kavala or something. It was, I forget the exact terminology, but it was a mechanism that was supposedly practiced in Ayurvedic, where people would completely regenerate the body by they wrap it and do some gems therapy and all this sort of like kind of wild stuff. And they would experience extreme levels of regenerative components to the physiology. There's also some evidence that he suggested of meditation masters who had lived far in advance of normal time frames. And I think Ayurvedic medicine in particular, around the different methodologies around the world, have alluded to some of these life-extending practices and principles. So how would you feel your own background? Maybe you can talk about your background in Ayurvedic, and then how maybe that correlates with what is now in the forefront, I think, of the holistic health industry, is how do we live longer and live stronger during that time?
Yeah, awesome segue. Ayurveda it's profound. I've really dedicated my life to studying it. It just simply works. It's incredibly deep. It's been around for 5,000 years. It really is an endless study. The Ayurveda is 2 words, 2 Sanskrit words. It means the science of life, Ayu, and Veda. And first and foremost, they really do focus on rejuvenation. There's a whole branch of Ayurveda called Rasayana, which are these rejuvenative therapies. And Rasayana, again, is 2 words in Sanskrit, rasa and yana, which means the path of juice. And in essence, the whole idea of these rejuvenative therapies are injecting juiciness back into the body. So if you look at the human, we start out as these very water-filled grapes, if you will. And over time, we lose a little bit of water, lose a little bit more, and then eventually we turn into raisins. And so Ayurveda is all about injecting that water back into the person, that vitality, through several different means, whether it's food, whether it's botanicals, whether it's through lifestyle regimens. They've nailed it all. And so they've lined all this up. They've created a whole science around it. Again, it's one of the 8 arms of Ayurveda. And so Ayurveda does a really good job in terms of rejuvenating the body.
So what drew you into the science of Ayurveda? There's a lot of different practices around the world, and they're becoming more prevalently aware. There's Chinese medicine, there's Western medicine, there's holistic therapy, there's Ayurvedic, etc. There's different branches around the world. What drew you into Ayurvedic, and perhaps you can indicate where you think its advantages are in helping people, live their best life?
Yeah, I think I was drawn to Ayurveda because I was drawn to yoga. I've been practicing yoga and I've been meditating for what seems like my entire life. And yoga and Ayurveda are sister sciences. And so they're both based in these wisdom traditions, wisdom philosophies. They use a lot of Sanskrit, so there's a lot of overlap. And then the philosophies really are one and the same. And so I think that my interest and my love of yoga really just kind of fell into my love of Ayurveda. I was on my path to get my traditional MD, get my doctorate in medical, conventional medicine. And along the way, I discovered naturopathic medicine. And in part, I love that because it, in a lot of ways, embodied Ayurvedic medicine. It was more holistic. It looked at the human body in a different light. It prescribed remedies based upon natural entities, whether it be food or botanicals or lifestyle regimens. And so I became a naturopathic physician. I did move away. I lived in India for a short stint, studied Ayurveda there, studied yoga there for a short time. And still, Ayurveda is kind of, I would say, the lens through which I see the world. And I look at the energetic properties of everything, and I can ascertain whether or not that's beneficial for me or whether or not that's going to throw me out of balance. And likewise, I can do that with patients. You get into body types, you get into energetic properties, imbalances. It's very easy using Ayurvedic principles to create balance in the system again. And so Ayurveda, it's starting to emerge, I would say, in America over the last maybe 5 years, especially with kind of the emergence or the rising of ashwagandha. Ashwagandha really, I think, is taking hold right now in the mainstream mindset. People are starting to see it at Costco and Whole Foods. They're starting to see it online, and I think that is a really great thing because that's a really nice entry point into this vast system of medicine. I would say that Ayurvedic medicine today is where Chinese medicine was in the 70s or maybe even the 80s. So in terms of acceptance, knowledge, in terms of licensure, in terms of finding good practitioners in the US. So it's just starting, but I'm very encouraged right now by what I'm seeing.
What do you think it makes Ayurvedic medicine unique to maybe comparative medical models that have been used, whether traditionally or in modern times?
I think the core principles, and really first and foremost, it comes down to body types. There's so much misinformation about body types. I generally don't like to start there, but I think people have heard of these 3 body types: Vata, Pitta, Kapha. There's so much value in understanding these concepts and then applying those concepts. And so, in short, Ayurveda is a medicine of opposites. And so like treats like, and opposites create balance. So if you have too much fire in your body, from a very elemental standpoint, if you have too much fire in your body, you need to do the opposite of fire in order to bring that back down to balance that. It really is as simple as that. And I think that is why Ayurveda is so effective. It's so practical. It's very easy to grasp. And it really is super personalized, and what's good for you. And so not all foods are healing. Not all foods are good for all body types. Like salads, leafy greens are not beneficial for me. They actually will push me out of balance. And so I need to do the opposite of that when I'm eating my diet. And so I like it. For me, I like Ayurveda because I've seen it work. I've used it both personally for issues that were not solvable through acupuncture, traditional medicine, nor otherwise. And then I've used it with patients that had longstanding health issues and challenges, and they were able to really just emerge in terms of health and vibrancy through Ayurvedic.
Excellent. So let's talk about the science of senolytics, and can you kind of break down what that is and how, and maybe why it's become front focused in today's world?
Yeah, so senolytics are fascinating. I certainly would say they're one of the most interesting areas right now of science and research. They're certainly the most buzzworthy area in anti-aging medicine right now. It is cutting edge medicine. So Ayurveda is old school, traditional, ancient. When you get into senolytics and senescence, that is completely the opposite. That's at the edge of the fireball. It's just now emerging, and we're starting to see it come out into the world. So it's in many ways, I think it's the future of medicine. It targets aging itself rather than the downstream manifestations of aging. And so it really is treating the root cause of aging overall. And so if I back up just a little bit, when we talk about aging from a very modern science standpoint, it's hard to describe really what it is. There probably are hundreds, if not thousands, of theories about why humans age. However, there's not one single idea or concept or theory that can really comprehensively explain the entire aging process. And so because of that, scientists then will combine different theories into an idea. And so that's kind of where we've landed right now. There's this idea called the hallmarks of aging. And these emerged in 2013 from a landmark paper. It's the most cited article in aging literature. These are 9 underlying processes that really drive the aging process. We know that they are at the root of why humans age overall. Right now, there's 9 of them. But there's a lot more that scientists are looking at and analyzing and weighing. There was a conference in Copenhagen, and they actually introduced 5 more hallmarks of aging, 2 of which were inflammation and a microbiome disturbances, 2 things that I think we now know to be critical for health. They want to add those into the 9 here shortly. So we might see more than 9 hallmarks, but right now we have these 9 hallmarks. Cellular senescence is one of those hallmarks. So it's one of the primary drivers behind the aging process.
Can you explain what that means for our listeners?
Totally. Yeah. So big words. Senescence comes from a Latin word senex, that means to grow old. And so cellular senescence then is the process by which cells in your body grow old. And so basically cells that grow old, they just permanently stop dividing. Typically your body will get rid of those, but it's the cells that stick around in the body that create health issues over time. And so cellular senescence is just aging cells that get stuck in the body as it is. And we have 37 trillion cells throughout the human body. All of them, with very few exceptions, go through the same life cycle. They're born, they grow, they mature, they replicate, they have babies, they acquire damage, they repair themselves. But eventually, after about 40, 50, maybe 60 divisions, they stop dividing. And typically the body will go in, kind of cleave them off, get rid of them, and new cells will emerge. And that's through a process called apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. Apoptosis is a Latin word, means falling off. So like leaves falling off of a tree or flowers falling off of a plant, fruit falling off of a bush. These cells fall off the body, and that's normal, that's healthy. However, if these cells linger in the body, that creates a lot of problems, and we can talk at great length about that.
Beautiful. So let's talk maybe a little bit. Can we expand on what are the earmarks, maybe the points that indicate or aging, and what might be accelerating that process or inverting or at least slowing that process down in the body from your perspective?
I mean, there's so many drivers. There are three major drivers that are known as kind of the primary drivers. Genomic instability, which basically is just damage to DNA, and that can be caused by any number of things. Reactive oxygen species, free radicals being one of them. Telomeres. A lot of people have heard of telomeres. They're like the little ends on shoelaces that, with every cell division, they shorten and they shorten and they shorten. And eventually, when they shorten to a certain point, cells then expire and they go into senescence. And then there's a lot of other things as well. We know that mitochondrial dysfunction plays a huge issue. Stem cell exhaustion plays a big issue. Over time, we lose the ability to produce new cells through these pluripotent stem cells that are in the body. Cellular communication. So without getting too technical, I think that cellular senescence is so impactful and so buzzworthy right now is because we have figured out how to target that specifically. And I think that is, for me, why senolytics are so fascinating and so interesting right now.
So what are some of the things that people can do to address the aging process? There's a lot of, opinions and theories out there, but what's the science saying from your perspective?
Well, I mean, if we just focus on cellular senescence as an example, there are some really well-known things that you can do to undercut that whole process. Exercise is number one. And I know everybody talks about that and people kind of roll their eyes and they're like, yeah, of course, exercise is important. But it really is. And people need to be active. I try to recommend moving your body at least 30 minutes, 5 times per week. But there are studies showing that exercise can reduce the biomarkers of senescent cells in the body. So that seems to be critically important for undercutting that process. A fasting mimicking diet or a low calorie diet can be critically important as well. We know that intermittent fasting, as an example, supports autophagy, which is cell repair. And if cells can't repair, they obviously move into senescence and they die. Basic immune support, critically important. I think people think about their immune system when they're sick. But in terms of undercutting the aging process, your immune system is critically important because it's going in and it's pulling out these old senescent cells from the body. If your immune system's not intelligent or primed or turned on, the body is unable to get rid of these cells through the immune deficiency. So it's critically important to take care of your immune system. So doing the basic things like sleeping, eating well, reducing stress, supplementally, taking beta glucans are potentially my favorite immune enhancer. Of course, getting vitamin D, zinc, black garlic, probiotics, postbiotics. There's a number of things you can do to really build up the immune system overall. And then, lastly, it's this area of senolytics, which we've mentioned the word senolytic on several occasions. But senolytics are compounds that can destroy these senescent cells in the body. And so this is a whole area that is emerging right now that a lot of startups, a lot of pharmaceutical companies, a lot of dietary supplement companies are investing a lot of time and money to really figure out, because the promise and the potential of senolytics is just crazy enormous.
So how do those two branches, senolytics and Ayurvedic medicine, how do they intersect in your opinion, since you're kind of looking at it through an Ayurvedic lens, would that be fair to suggest? Yeah,
that's a really good question. It's hard to answer. I mean, they use different words, different terminologies. They're really different paradigms altogether. I would say, well, it's interesting. So as an example, Qualia Senolytic is a product that we recently created. And it's based in science. We've run clinicals on it, works very well. But the ingredients that are in there are all validated as senolytic in action. One of the ingredients in there is an ingredient called piperlongum. And piperlongum is really foundational to Ayurvedic philosophy and treatment. Piperlongum is a close relative to black pepper. It's usually used as a digestive stimulant. It's also used as a rejuvenative agent. And so that whole branch that we kind of talked about briefly, Rasayana, in Ayurveda, they would use pipali or Indian long pepper as a rejuvenative agent that you take every day to rejuvenate the tissues. And it appears to have an affinity for the digestive tract as well as the lungs, which is really interesting. So I think that there's some overlap there, but it's really hard to just say that they overlap coherently because they use different words and different language.
So what do you think are the things that probably contribute to an acceleration of aging in the population? What are the earmarks that you say that? So we kind of look at, here's things that we do. What are the no-nos from your standpoint?
First and foremost, it's sleep. I think people aren't sleeping enough, nor are they sleeping in the right ways. That's when the body rejuvenates itself. If the body can't rejuvenate itself, over time, that's going to have a compounding effect on the body and mind. So it really is as simple as that. I think people have lost their connection with the earth. And this gets into some of the new energetic kind of woo-woo science, but it's emerging and it's really quite compelling in my mind. This idea of earthing and grounding is critically important, and maintaining a relationship with the earth, getting outside, getting barefoot in the grass, in the dirt. I think that's important because it changes your electrical properties in your body. When you are out of contact with that, you can build up certain charges in the body that can be detrimental. And so again, that's a whole nother emerging area that I'm absolutely fascinated with. But I know I personally use an earthing pad under my desk. I use it daily, if not, a couple times per week when I don't have chances to get outside. And so I think that's critically important. Lastly, I'll probably just mention toxins. I spent a good deal of my naturopathic training studying environmental medicine and just seeing how these environmental toxins are impacting the body will make you go crazy. I mean, I think ignorance is bliss in a lot of ways. I know I know too much about drinking water and about foods. And I'm a little sad that I know as much as I know because I just want to eat and I want to enjoy it. But now I'm very mindful about what I put into my body because this toxic burden that foods and environmental exposures is putting on us is absolutely detrimental. And it really comes down to its impact at the cellular level, often in terms of mitochondria, NAD production, in terms of DNA. All of that is compounded by toxins.
What do you think are some of the toxins that are impacting people in a day-to-day life that they may not be aware of or that are commonplace that we just kind of brush off as, hey, this is doing a lot more damage than we might imagine?
Yeah, well, speaking about the electrical impact on the body, when you look at EMFs, we don't even understand the science of that. But I have no doubt that impacts you, if not subtly, grossly. Glyphosates, the conversation is now becoming more widespread, thankfully. But glyphosates are detrimental to human health, and they're everywhere in our food chain right now. And so, I worry about kids that are eating these glyphosates on a daily basis, and how these small bodies are challenged or tasked with getting rid of these glyphosates in an efficient manner, or else. Microplastics, another area that is really concerning to me. Plastics are everywhere. I recently read that we consume on average of a credit card of plastic every week in the human body. And so if you think about that, I mean, our body is not designed to get rid of these chemicals. These are forever chemicals that are forever in the environment and sometimes forever in our bodies. And so, I really worry about that a lot. And then lastly, I'll mention mercury amalgams in teeth. Right? Something as basic as you have a cavity, you had a filling, and then you've had this mercury amalgam composite filled in your tooth over the course of decades. Those things off gas, and so that can be super detrimental to the body as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people. It's interesting because I've been around the industry from, I think we're well into my third decade. And when people were talking about amalgams and glyphosates 25 years ago, we were like the tinfoil hat people. And
Right.
Now that's emerged into the mainstream, which leads me to maybe, because I think some of our listeners are fairly sophisticated in understanding, that's why they're here. What would you say some areas that are emerging in, anti-aging medicine or toxicity that's contributing to aging that they may not be aware of, or that you're kind of like, wow, this is exciting? And
wow, where to even start? It's interesting to see how a lot of the sciences are starting to merge. Suddenly, they're not, they're not distinct. And so I think when you start looking at the different sciences as a whole, as one, you get a very different picture of the human body and what's possible. So that's exciting. I'm excited to see the rise of functional medicine. I think that it's changing conventional medicine from the inside out. I don't think functional medicine is the end all and be all in terms of medical care, but I'm happy that it's here, that it's available, and that it is creating positive change within the system. Because that system is slow to change. It's incredibly outdated. It's way too heroic. And I think it's missing a lot of the basics that actually create health. It's a disease-focused system, not a health-focused system. And so I'm excited that the idea of health and wellness is back into the conversation. I think I'm hopeful that social media too can be helpful in all of this. I think it could be detrimental in certain cases, but I, again, have seen this movement where people suddenly are excited about health and wellness. It's like it's cool to be well again. And so you see these green products that are online, green powder products that just blow up because people are excited. It looks fun to take, they taste good, all those things. So I think that the whole industry, the dietary supplement industry, the food industry, I think that those things are rapidly changing, and I'm very excited about that.
So what are some areas that your work is particularly focused on in this area of senolytics, longevity, Ayurvedic medicine, and that you think are leading to kind of promising direction?
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: supercharge your protein shake. Everyone knows protein shakes are a great way to sneak in extra protein, build more muscle, even replace meals and burn more fat. The problem is the highest quality protein typically absorbs at around 40%. One way to fix this and dramatically increase how quickly and effective your protein shake digests is to add 2 to 3 capsules of masszymes into your shake. One research study showed that pre-digested protein during a meal increased muscle growth significantly. To take advantage of this, just blend the open capsules into your shake, and within 15 minutes or less, the enzymes will have begun to break down the protein into amino acids. This can make your shakes at least 2 to 3 times more potent. Some people do this and sip on their shake while lifting to provide their muscles with a steady stream of amino acids during their workout. To save 10% on masszymes, use the code SHAKE10, that's SHAKE10, at masszymes.com. That's SHAKE10 at masszymes.com.
Yeah, I mean, right now there's not a lot of senolytic options that are out there. 2015 is when the term senolytic was coined. There was a study on dasatinib and quercetin, a 2-compound senolytic that worked very effectively in mice. It showed that it decreased senescent cells in these mice. and it created these really amazing functional benefits in the mice as well. And so that is really what started all of the interest in research in this area of senolytics. And since then, we've been able to identify a number of compounds that are very potent, very powerful senolytics. One would be fisetin. And so we're starting to see a number of fisetin products that are available in the marketplace. What I like about what Neurohacker Collective is doing is that I feel like we're really early to the game, which is fantastic. We're a leading voice when it comes to cellular senescence and how you can target it, approach it from a natural perspective. And we're creating products that are based in the science. And so when we're giving fisetin in a capsule, we are mirroring what is done in the realm of clinical science. And so we're giving it at that same 20 milligram per kilogram of body weight dose to make sure that people are actually getting an effect in this area. And so I also like, Neurohacker tends to run what we call beta tests on all of our products. And so we run studies on all of our products to make sure that they're efficacious before they go to market. So we're really, I think, incorporating what's already been done in terms of hardcore clinical science. And we're also looking at the mechanism of actions of all of these natural compounds and introducing ones that we know can undercut senescent cells in the body. So I think we're adding a little bit of innovation to this emerging area as well.
Now, when it comes to aging, is there, looking at it from an Ayurvedic perspective, with a different type, physical types or body types or mental types, is there variances into what compounds would decelerate the aging or accelerate the aging, or is it a one size fits all? Are the common elements that reduce the effects of aging or slow the aging process? Are those universal, or are they applied individually from an Ayurvedic perspective?
Yeah, really, really good question. I think it depends. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of things that you can do to create balance that are based upon your body type. And so that would be very personalized. One thing would not fit everybody. But there are a lot of things that are quote unquote tridoshic, which is they're balancing to every body type. So regardless, short, tall, black, white, male, female, everybody could use these tridoshic remedies to kind of undercut the aging process.
What are some of those things that you think that are universal?
Well, so there's a number of botanicals that are universal, but I'll just mention panchakarma, which is it's basically detox therapy, Ayurvedic style. Panchakarma means 5 actions, and so there are these 5 ways that you can get rid of vata, pitta, and kapha, these doshas that build up in the tissues. And make a person age more or less. And so that therapy is.
Can you explain the therapy for us? Because that's kind of like one of the legendary Ayurvedic practices. And I think a lot of people who aren't exposed to Ayurvedic don't know what this is and how they might engage in it. But there's places that go around the world and you can do a shorter version or a longer version. Maybe you can expand on that particularly, because I think it's one of the great secrets in Ayurvedic medicine that's a lot of people aren't aware of.
Yeah, I agree. Panchakarma, it can be quite expensive. There are retreats that do this over the course of 7 days, 14 days, 28 days. I, for example, worked at a Panchakarma hospital in India, and people would come for 40 plus days. Wow. And it was amazing to see this philosophy in action. And so it is a specialty over in India. And it's amazing. So you could do that. You could do a very expensive, very high-end retreat, or you could do something at home, and you could do everything in between. So it really is available to every person. But Panchakarma is just a detox regimen. In short, there is an early stage preparation where you are oiling up the body. You're doing oil topical treatments. You're consuming spoonfuls of ghee, which is clarified butter. And so you are doing that over the course of several days. And the thinking there is that you're oleating the body, you're loosening up these old toxins that are stowed within every tissue of the body. And much like a piece of leather that has dried out over time, when you add oil to it, you can rejuvenate that tissue. And so that's the starting point for Panchakarma. It's called oleation. And that can last anywhere, generally speaking, from 3 days to, I'm going to say 14 days. It really depends on the person. The older you are, the drier you are, and the more oil that you need. But you need that first step. And that really helps to stabilize you through this whole program. And then the second step is sweating. So there's a number of sweating therapies. It could be as simple as just sitting in the sauna a couple times per day. Once you've oleated the body, then you sweat. And what happens is you move your doshas out of the tissues into your digestive tract. Sounds very foreign to the Western mind, but when you get into Ayurvedic philosophy, you understand the ins and outs and why that can be. And so Vata, Pitta, Kapha are these dynamic energies that are throughout our body. When you oleate, you sweat, you push these energies into the digestive system. And then, so that's the second part. The third part then is the Panchakarma. It's the 5 actions. So it's 5 ways then that we get rid of these energies from the digestive tract. And just in short, the first one is called Nasya. And Nasya is the inhalation of certain herbs through the nose, and helps just to clear this part of the body, anything from the neck up. It's a nasal application. The second one is laxatives. So just to help move things through. Vata, as an example, is eliminated through laxatives through the colon. Vomiting is another one, therapeutic vomiting, getting rid of these through the upper GI tract and out of the system. Bloodletting is the fourth one. And traditionally, Ayurveda would use leeches. So you would put a leech on a certain part of the body, which would then extract blood from the body. And that then would allow the body to rejuvenate itself, because a lot of pitta or fire builds up in the blood. And so you need to relieve the blood so that new blood can come in there and start again. And then the fifth action is an enema. And enemas are, according to Ayurveda, they are the most powerful. They're the most potent. And so it's only if you've done everything else correctly that then a trained Ayurvedic physician or a practitioner will allow you to do an enema, because it's so depleting to the body. And so you tend to do an herbal enema or a coffee enema. And again, that helps to get rid of the Vata. And Vata is the major driving energy of aging, according to Ayurveda. And so a lot of the Ayurvedic treatments that are geared towards aging are really geared towards removing Vata overall from the body.
That's a really good description of Panchakarma. And in your experience, if someone's interested in doing a Panchakarma, where would they go, or where would they look into that? And should they do a 7-day, a 21-day, or whatever? How would you piece that out?
Another really good question. I would recommend reading about it. I think it's important to understand the philosophy, so that you're not just passively sitting through a regimen and crossing your fingers and hoping that it works. If you understand the why, I think it makes it much more universally acceptable, and people get more benefit from them. There's a number of really fantastic books on the marketplace that explain the process. But I would recommend working with somebody local if that's easier. There are a number of Ayurvedic practitioners in most major big cities. Not all of them focus on Panchakarma, but if you want to do it right, if you have the time, you have the money, I certainly would go to the south of India, in Kerala or Tamil Nadu. One place would be the Ayurvedic Trust. The Ayurvedic Trust has a website. It's an incredible Panchakarma hospital. They have incredibly skilled practitioners that are there. And it's very traditional. So it's very old school, and it's been up and running forever. So I like that there's that lineage that just runs through that whole program.
And what would be the pricing and ballparks of doing something like that?
It depends on where you go. Again, doing it yourself, there's a lot of risk if you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
Working with somebody locally, you can do it fairly cheap because you can do most of these things at home. Some of the herbal therapies would cost a little bit. Some of the face-to-face times with the practitioners would cost a little bit. But doing it, as I recommended in South India, as an example, it can be several $1,000s. And, you could do it one time, or you could do it seasonally. I think that's fair enough.
Yeah, I've had a number of friends that have done that. And it's both their subjective experience, but also your observation of people that go and come back. It's like, wow, there's a remarkable transformation that seems to occur with those processes. So I think for those who are considering that, I would highly recommend checking one of those out and, carve out 2 or 3 weeks and go do one of those. I think it's a good investment in your longevity overall and a general sense of well-being. I want to go into maybe some of the behaviors or lifestyle things. You talked about it a little bit, but I think maybe specifics when you're talking about one of the areas that seem to be universally accepted is eat less to live longer. And there's kind of some different camps in this, in that there's the intermittent fasting camps, and then there's, fast 1 day a week people, and then there's the people that are just starving themselves. Okay. So where do you fit into the fasting equation for longevity or rejuvenation? And what are you seeing? Because there's some people who are doing intermittent fasting find that after a number of years, it can have negative effects metabolically. So what's your opinion on the whole thing?
Yeah, I worry about any dietary regimen that isn't sustainable and that doesn't create health in the long term. I hesitate putting anybody on one of those, even short term, because if it's not built for you, why are you doing it in the first place? I appreciate they can change physiology and metabolism, things short term that can be beneficial. But it's really hard to find a one size fits all program. Mm-hmm. So I think in certain cases, if we just look at intermittent fasting, I think in certain cases that can be beneficial. I know for myself, it absolutely isn't. And I can explain the in and out of why that is from an Ayurvedic perspective. But for some people, it certainly can be. And so I don't want to say that it's not a helpful thing. I would say that it's more important to know your body type, and then to eat accordingly, in a way that balances out your body type. And I think that is going to set you up for the greatest chances of living a long, healthy life overall. And so that sounds super simple, I appreciate, but that is the Ayurvedic way. It really is about creating balance. Like increases like, and balances opposites, and opposites balance. That you can do that just through eating a very body type appropriate diet.
So could you maybe give us some generalizations on the doshas and, dietary recommendations around that? Because I think that's an individual aspect. And this is one of my pet peeves, by the way. In Western science, and if we look at almost all of the research that's been done, they'll take a standard group of however many subjects, but there's no adjustment for genetic variance within that. And Ayurvedic is essentially sharing there is a significant difference between the different types of bodies and how they might respond to any given regimen. So there is a designation. Can you explain those designations, the doshas, perhaps in Ayurvedic, and how that might apply to longevity applications or dietary or metabolic issues?
Yeah, so in short, there's three body types. There's the vata, there's pitta, and there's kapha. And then there's different combinations. You can be a combination of all three. You can be a combination of two. It really depends. And so your body type, your ratio of those three different forces, vata, pitta, kapha, is as unique as your fingerprint. So everybody's different. And when you're born with a specific set ratio of vata, pitta, kapha. And your goal in life then is to maintain that set point. And so any variance from that creates imbalance. And so what creates balance for you, Wade, probably is very different than what create balance in me. But just in short, if you look at the body types, then a vata is a combination of two different elements. So it's air and space. So there's three other elements. There's water, there's fire, there's earth. It lacks those elements. So if you are purely a vata, like I am a vata, I'm thin, I lack the fire, I lack the water, I lack the earth. And so I don't want to add more space and air into my diet, right? I want to balance that out with the other three elements. And so when I'm eating my diet as a vata person, I'm then focusing on foods that have water, that have fire, and that have a lot of the earth element in them. And if I can do that, I can maintain my set ratio to make sure that my vata doesn't naturally go out of balance. Mm-hmm. So vatas will naturally have vata type imbalances over the course of their life. Okay. A pitta body type tends to be, they have a lot of fire. That's like kind of their keynote. They tend to be a little bit more well-rounded. They're a little bit more muscular. They tend to be very sharp. Both in mind and tongue. Because of that internal fire element, they can assimilate ideas very quickly and they can speak very fiery. And so pitta as a whole is a combination of fire and water elements. So it exists really in the body, in the blood, as an example. And so again, just like the vatas, you want to do the opposite about what the elements that are innate into your body. And so I don't want to add more fire through my diet, right? I don't want to consume more coffee, which is fiery. It's going to heat me up. It's going to stimulate me. I don't want to do that. I want to do the opposite of that, right? I want to do ice water as an example. And so that's critically important for those individuals. And then the third body type is kapha. And kaphas are a combination of two elements. They are water and earth. And so again, in order to create balance there, you don't want to add more water and earth into your diet. You want to do the opposite. And so Ayurveda is great because they've listed all of the foods according to their energetic properties. We know very specifically what vatas should be eating, what pittas should be eating, and what kaphas should be eating. So in short, that kind of gets at the summary, kind of at the body types, but there's a lot more to it. I think it's always oversimplified, and there's a lot of misinformation that are out there. But obviously, when we're even going through the course of our life, we go through different phases. So early on, we go through a kapha phase. So when you're 0 to about 25. You tend to have more kapha in your body naturally. And then you go through a pitta phase, which is about 25 to about 45. And then after the age of 45, you start moving into that vata phase. And so I spoke earlier about vata is kind of the key driver in terms of aging. And so it's important then to offset vata during the course of your life, but especially when you're old, you need to do things that are anti-vata just to maintain health and balance.
So that's really, thank you for that. I think that was a good illustration of the components. And I guess that's the intersection of where an Ayurvedic practitioner would help the individual navigate both their own individual dosha as well as the stage they might be at or what might be impacting that, so that you're navigating through the different phases of life in the best manner possible. So I know I kind of interjected on this. So where do you think the future of senolytics, anti-aging and stuff is going? What's the breaking grounds that are becoming more and more exciting or relevant in today's world?
I think it's reframing how we're using these nutritional compounds. I mean, we all know how curcumin works. Curcumin from turmeric, a very powerful anti-inflammatory nutrient, fantastic for joints and a number of other ailments as well. But now we understand that it actually has the senolytic activity. And so if we can get curcumin into the brain, the idea then is that we can have a senolytic activity within the brain itself. And so there are senescent cells that get lodged in between the brain cells that we need to get rid of and regenerate in order to have optimal cognition, mood, memory, whereabouts, all of that as we age. And so for me, I'm really excited about repurposing all of these ingredients that we have grown to love, that we've learned about, we've started to use more and more, but now I think we can use them with a new lens and for different purposes.
This speaks to a topic I think that a lot of people are interested in or are aware of, and that is the cognitive decline with aging that can happen. Of course, we look at the data around Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and stuff, and it's frightening to say the least. And, having parents that are in an aging perspective now, I'm seeing some of the degenerative components start to occur. What do you feel is some preventative ways to maintain cognitive health as we age? And what is the role of, say, nootropics in that process? And so I guess there would be these senolytic aspects, and then there's the nootropic aspect. And I don't know where those intersections might be or how you would illustrate that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of overlap. I mean, the brain is a healthy brain requires a lot of fat. And so much like Ayurveda, where you're doing a lot of the oleation treatments, I think it's important to make sure that you're consuming enough fats on a daily basis. And that helps to support brain health as we age. We know that some of the senolytic therapies can help boost a protein called alpha-klotho. Alpha-klotho is a protein that's protective to brain health, brain function. It's just now we're seeing that link between senolytics and that protein. And scientists have been trying forever to raise that protein in the body and in the brain in particular to get benefits. And so we're starting to see that now emerge as a potential side effect of senolytics, which is fantastic. When you get into Ayurvedic diet too, they meaning the ancient saints and sages of Ayurvedic medicine from 5,000 years ago, they classified all foods according to the impact on the brain, which is genius. So we've already talked about Vata, Pitta, Kapha. I've talked a little bit about the 5 elements, which are space, air, fire, earth, water. But they now have these other properties. There are 3 that describe foods. And so foods have one of 3 impacts on the brain. They promote sattva, they promote rajas, or they promote tamas. And so without going into too much depth there, I think that looking at the quality of your food is critically important for maintaining your state of mind as you age. And there are foods that promote sattva, and sattva is the quality of like clear openness. It's, you have a sattvic mind. When you meditate for, a 60-minute stint, you wake up, you come out of that meditation and suddenly your mind's wide awake. It's open, it's clear, it's vibrant. And so there are foods that promote that quality in the mind. There are foods too that are very rajasic, which create movement in the mind. And there are foods that create tamas, which is dullness in the mind. And so Rajas foods, as an example, would be coffee, right? Creates that mental energy, which is critically important. Too much of it can be harmful, but meat, as an example, is tamasic. And so I know a lot of nutritionists and a lot of what people are talking about are like, eat more meat. It's really impactful. You need more protein. We need to get back to the basics. All good, but just know that meat is dulling to the mind. Mushrooms are dulling to the mind. And so Ayurveda, again, has classified foods according to all of that. I would say that it's critically important to be mindful about the type of foods. And if you can, choose foods that are sattvic in nature.
What are some sattvic foods that you think are universally beneficial?
Sattvic foods are really, so they're always plant-based. They're always organic because you don't want all the other chemicals involved. Dairy historically is a very sattvic food. I think the whole dairy chain now has become somewhat contaminated. It's hard to find really good source, clean dairy, but if you can, incredibly sattvic. Ghee, which is clarified butter, can be incredibly sattvic. Most fruits, most veggies are on that list. Rice, especially basmati rice, incredibly sattvic. Again, there's a whole list that you can find online. If I had to recommend one meal as kind of a mono diet for most people, it's a dish called khichdi or khichdi, pronounced both ways. But khichdi is a simple blend of sattvic foods. It's basmati rice, mung beans, select vegetables, spices, and lots of ghee. And you can do this for one meal, or you can do khichdi for the course of several weeks. And it really can shift your mindset. It's really invaluable for anybody that sits in front of a computer day in and day out. Critically important for anybody who has a yoga practice. Critically important for anybody with a mood disorder. It's good just to kind of push reset and let the body clear out toxins and let the mind cleanse itself. And so I highly recommend a mono diet of khichdi to promote sattva.
That's great. So I guess wrapping up, we're getting up through the hour. So where can people find out more information about you, your work, and what you're kind of, where they can follow you and find out more information about this? Because I think it's really great. I love the Ayurvedic designation, and I think it's going to rise to the forefront over the next, couple of decades, specifically because we have enough science to correlate now some of these ancient practices that they say, oh, well, actually, this actually does make sense. Absolutely agree with you.
I think the best place to start doing a deep dive is Neurohacker Collective. We have a website, neurohacker.com. Incredible amounts of information on that. A lot of science, a lot of articles, blogs, descriptions of products. We incorporate a lot of Ayurvedic botanicals and Ayurvedic thinking into how we create and design products. And then Neurohackers, everywhere online as well. So Instagram, you name it. And we do have our own podcast called Collective Insights. So we bring on, leading edge scientists, doctors, thinkers to talk about all things that are interesting.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I think this is a good opening for people who want to know a little bit more about Ayurvedic and its role in, preventative medicine and longevity. And I'm a big advocate of it. I think it's exciting times that we're now, it's being infused into the collective awareness. And, like I said, with science now being able to confirm many of these things that were poo-pooed a few years ago, and now we're starting to see a coalescence. So very exciting. And for those who are listening to this podcast, you can find out more by going to the websites suggested here. They're all in the links in the show notes. Thanks for joining us. And thank you, Dr. Nick, for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip. Turn cultured foods into superfoods. Raw fermented foods like sauerkraut and low sugar live yogurt can be good for you, but rarely have enough of the right probiotic strains for therapeutic benefit. So here's a way that you can turn them into superfoods. What I do is I get some raw sauerkraut or a healthy yogurt. Ideally, it's grass-fed or coconut-based, and you can empty 3 caps of P3OM into a container and mix it up thoroughly. Leave it at room temperature for a couple of hours before putting it back into the fridge. And what's going to happen is these probiotic levels will be multiplied. In fact, it doubles every 20 minutes. And then what you're going to get is you're going to have a food with strong proteolytic activity. To learn more about P3OM and why its patented strains make it the strongest probiotic available, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.